to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm the host of the show. And today it's something special. We're live streaming across Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'm very excited about this because we have a fascinating guest on the show. He's standing by. His name is Scott Shay. Before I introduce Scott, I want to tell all the listeners that if you're getting this later by podcast, we will be live streaming today across LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. We'll be producing this as a podcast and releasing it. You can find it on any of your favorite podcast channels. We have an international audience. So it's my pleasure today to welcome to the show Mr. Scott A. Shay. Scott, welcome to the show.
It's really a pleasure to be here, Tom, and an honor as well.
It's my honor, Scott. And before we get rolling here, I want to tell everybody that I have a bio in front of me of Mr. Shay. I've done a lot of research, and there's a personal connection to this story. So, Scott, why don't we do this? I'm going to ask you to tell us a bit about yourself, and maybe I'll be creative because I'm going to build you up after. Tell me one thing about yourself that you believe many people don't know about you.
Well, people don't think that as a bank chairman, as someone who founded a bank, we've announced our results today. As a matter of fact, we're above $55 billion bank. That I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment where I lived in the dining room, and that my mother's brother lived in the living room, and then I'm the first one on either side of my family to go to college.
Well, thank you. Well, see, there was something I didn't know. I wasn't in the bio, so that's getting me excited. Scott, if you want to just catch your breath for a minute, I want to build you up and tell everybody about you, and then I have an opening statement that'll get us into a conversation. So everyone, Scott A. Shay, he's a leading businessman, a thought leader, author of 2 widely read books. And what's notable is he co-founded the Signature Bank in 2001 out of New York, and it's a large bank for private business owners. I have akin to Scott because as an author, we have written books. He's written 2, and the one we're going to get into deeply today is one called In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism. And it's been widely read and quite frankly, given early and advanced praise. So, Scott, I'm going to start off by reading something that I found about you, and then we'll get into a conversation. And it says, as someone who co-founded a $46 billion bank in the middle of the great financial meltdown, and as a son of a Holocaust survivor, Scott Shay knows something about weathering social, political disasters. He sees another one coming. He's written a book, In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism, to tell us what we can do to prevent it. Shay had a ringside seat for the 2008 financial meltdown. It reminded him of his father's stories about the rise of Hitler cult in Germany. The common thread was idolatry. Wow, I mean, my mind's going in many directions. You'll learn that I'm a three-dimensional thinker. Before we get into that, I'm gonna get you to go back where all this started, and I'm gonna make a comment and ask you to tell me that hero's journey is all about that. Sometimes in our lives we hear this call to go on an adventure, and the narrative of my show, Scott, as you know, is based on Joseph Campbell's work in that area. You know, many people do things, but sometimes they hear a call to go on an adventure and discover, and then come back and be a guide to change the world. And I want to know, what is that one thing in your life that really drives you to do something like this? You're a banker, and why would you write a book on something like this? Tell us more.
So, as you know, Tom, my father was a Holocaust survivor. So in 1941, the Nazis entered his town of Spexner, Lithuania, and essentially killed my father's entire family. His father, his brothers, his aunts, his uncles, his cousins. And then my father spent 4 years as slave laborer, as an inmate in concentration camps. And that has had a tremendous impact on me. It's been a lifelong journey to understand, how can this sort of thing happen? It's not that far away, Europe, and it's not that long ago. And so that has motivated my entire existence, is how do societies fall apart so badly? How do people treat each other so badly in ways that they know are wrong.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. My heart's growing just listening to you say that, and I don't have an ego, but I'm going to tell you that I nailed it because I was looking for that in your information, and I thought, let me try to see if I got it. And I'm going to read something else here, Scott, just to keep us going. There's a passage that says acknowledging the problem of evil in some of your work, and I'm going to read a few excerpts. The question of evil has troubled me since I was a boy. I met many Holocaust survivors through my father. And then goes on to say, we, the children of survivors, knew to avoid topics that even touched on the Holocaust experiences of our parents. I do indelibly recall one evening, it was during a card game at a club, when one of the members sitting at the table with my father turned to a fellow survivor and said, in a matter-of-fact voice, how can you go to synagogue for the high holidays? Where was God when it counted for the dead members of our families? And their answers left me dumbfounded for a long time, and they linger with me today. And some matter-of-factly denied God's existence. I'm going like, wow, man. And I want to go deep with you here. Before we came on, I asked you if you'd seen my TED Talk, and I told you that I, 2 years ago, fell on a ride for cancer I was doing for charity in a bathtub the night after and suffered a brain injury. And today I'm 2 years in. I still am recovering from light sensitivity and depression. My TED Talk was about that. But the thing is, we have a lot in common, Scott. And I spent a third of my career as a career banker. I met my wife through the bank. I was an executive in our credit unions, which you would call your community banks. And throughout my career, something ruled me, and I didn't understand what it was. And when I fell in the bathtub, life stopped. I had denied my faith. Now, I want to tell you, I'm not an atheist, but I never believed God really was there, for the sake of what happened to me when I went through my childhood, which wasn't a good scene for me. But when I went through this chapter of my life, I couldn't find hope. I couldn't find the future. And my wife was watching religious shows, and I started watching them. And then I started wearing this cross that I have around my neck. And I started looking for a book called Dummies for Religion. I found the Bible confusing. The last thing I want to tell you, and then we'll turn it back to you, is my father, passed away in January 18, was a Hindu. My parents are from Fiji. My grandparents are from India. My father was a Hindu, but when my mom met him in Fiji, he was a Mormon. Go figure. Never drank, never smoked. Got in the army and became a pretty bad drinker. When we came to Canada at age 5, my mother baptized me a Catholic. And so here we are with 3 different religions surrounding me, and I'm going like, what the hell is... And I literally, because of what was going on in my home and my parents' divorce and things fell apart, I really looked at God sometimes and says, you know what? Why aren't you there for me? Why have you forsaken me? I had my little Bible, and I just gave up on it. And so here I am, and then this man, you, Scott Shay, comes in my life, and you've written this book that I'm mesmerized by. So thank you for letting me share that and dominate the conversation up front. Now we'll make it about you. So let's get into that, Scott. I mean, the book is called In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism. Barney Frank, former member of House of Representatives, said, I can't think of another book which I disagree so strongly with that has engaged me as deeply as this one. Scott makes the case for religious beliefs with deep scholarship, clear logic, and great civility. It would be wonderful if other advocates on both sides would take up this discourse in a similar civil matter. Tell me what it is about religion and atheism and which one matters, which one's wrong. I mean, just help me get through that.
Sure. Well, you've asked a lot of questions in one, and I will say this. And in a way, you really did nail it, because for believers, there's really one question. For atheists, I think there are a lot of questions to explain this world. But for believers, there's really one. How can an all-good God let evil happen? Let such evil happen that we witness every day? Everything from systemic racism to garden variety evil to natural evil. How does this happen? And that's the question that my father was grappling with. The club was something called the Jewish Lithuanian Club in Chicago, and they would meet in multi-purpose rooms and the like. And that one conversation really nailed it for me too, because these were people who had seen hell. My father,
Yeah.
I'm going to take a little detour. My father, I told you, in June of 41 when the Nazis came in. He was deported to the Svetlin-Hadekrug work camp. He then he was sent to Auschwitz. He was there, and I say, quote unquote, luckily for only 3 months, because then he was sent to Warsaw with a slave labor detail. Then he was sent to Dachau. When he was released from Dachau, when he was liberated by the American forces from Dachau, he was less than 70 pounds. He was probably days, weeks, almost certainly not months away from death. Days or weeks. And so when he got to Chicago and was able to rebuild a life, he knew with the certainty that there were hidden miracles that got him there. If you had been holding that microphone with your right hand instead of your left hand, if you would be facing two feet to the side, those kind of minor things. If my father had been one step to one side, one step to the other side, one person in front of the line, one person behind in the line, he would have been dead. There were so many small miracles that got him through. But having said that, so he had, with my father, there wasn't actually a question of whether there's a God. It wasn't even a matter of faith. There was certainty there was a God. There was no way all of this would have happened in the precise ways. And I could go on, I could spend this entire broadcast talking about this. About little things. But the flip side, and this is the key, is that where was God? And my father wondered, where was God when it came to his father? His mother had already died in childbirth before the Nazis arrived. But even that's a question of where was God? Where was God when the Nazis murdered my father's aunts, his uncles, his cousins, everybody, almost everybody he knew, with maybe 2 exceptions from Lithuania, or from Spectral Lithuania, not from all of Lithuania. So that is the real question that I spent a lot of time in the book trying to answer. And I will tell you one more thing. When I was doing live book tour before COVID ended live book tour, now I have the pleasure of meeting folks over the internet and on podcasts. But I would be at bookstores, I'd be at JCCs, I'd be at churches, Greek Orthodox churches, Protestant churches, it didn't matter. I'd always, not always, 90% of the time, I'd get one question from someone who would say, I used to believe in God, but now my sister died, my brother died, my father died, my spouse has this, so I've lost my faith. I would invariably get that question. So that's the question that really bothers people. And so my book is divided into various parts, but one part that I really focus on is that question. And I think the Bible comes to help us with that question, but there's no snap answer. There's no quick answer, and we can get into it, and we can get into how the Bible approaches this, if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do that. I know my head's going on a journey in different directions with what you said, and this is what you get from me. I'm writing notes on my paper here. For those listening to the podcast, they won't see that, but I'm fascinated by this, and I want to go back to just something I told you about my childhood and having multiple religions and losing my own faith. First of all, when you take it back from me, tell us what the difference is between being an atheist and being someone who loses a belief or can't find God. That's the first thing. So we'll just park that for a minute. But I want to talk to you, Scott, about brain science, because a lot of the work I've done to discover my own truth, and I teach executives in my work, and as a former exec, is that we are born with, we call it golden children. Campbell calls us golden Buddha statues, and over time this cement crust builds up on us. But we have a couple million neurons in our brains that are empty. There's no thoughts and emotions. And so as we come into the world, there's no rules in our brain that say there isn't a God, there is a God. At least that's the logical explanation I have. And I believe that as we go through our life, it's the thoughts and emotions that we hear and we observe around us from people who nurture us, from things we see and hear, that are wired into those as what I call thinking traps. They're thought patterns that are wired in, and they rule us for life. The last thing I want to say to you on that is, and you may know this, is up until about age 20, we don't have the use of our prefrontal cortex. In other words, everything that we take in, the billions of bits of data, the brain believes it's true. So, I might have heard from my mom that, Daddy's a Mormon, and then seeing him beating her up when he was drunk, and then wiring that in with the word faith and God. And so when I hear the word God and faith now, my brain says, let me go look for proof. Oh, God and faith was this, but it's connected to your mom being hurt, and so I'm giving you a picture of what I think some of the issues are around me being limited to understanding faith, and that what was put in me was not true. And so what we need now is people like you and the work you're doing to help educate us or get the word out about the truth. And then we can rewire those thought patterns. That's why I'm so interested in digging into this. So back to you on what is an atheist versus someone who denies God, and then any comment on what I said, and then tell us about what you're going to tell us.
I think we have to step back. So I'm going to get to your question, but I'll have to get to your question later so that I think my answer will be more understandable. So you started out and you mentioned idolatry.
Yes.
Here's, if everyone listening to this remembers one thing, I hope they remember this and one other thing that I'm going to say a little bit later, which is that we tend to think idolatry is some sort of quaint bowing down to statues or some weird Wiccan rituals. But in reality, idolatry is a set of lies about power. It's about ascribing super authority or superpower to finite beings, individuals like you or me or your mother or your father, in this case, your father, or ideologies or natural processes. And so we may have think that we licked the God King Pharaoh 3,300 years ago, and so all is good. But the whole 20th century was a catalog of God King Pharaohs who were idols. Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, the Assad family, the Kim family. It goes on and on and on. Perhaps the Chinese Communist Party ideology. It goes on and on and on. And what those folks did, those God King idols did, was they used the same tropes as Pharaoh: poetry, pageantry, theater, myths, all backed up with secret police, secret informers, and strong armies. So that when Stalin said, kill all the kulaks, starve a quarter of the Ukraine, send tens of millions of people to the gulag, nobody would stand up and say, no, this isn't right. Nobody did. They just followed what the God King said. When you have 1 million Uyghurs sent to detention camps in the Xinjiang province of China, nobody says, dear CCP, that's wrong. People shouldn't be sent to these detention camps or these re-education camps for, people don't even, it doesn't even exist, because the idolatry says that the God King Pharaoh has super authority.
Yeah.
And not necessarily superpowers anymore, like in the ancient world. But if you think about it, how did Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, Kevin Spacey, and that list goes on as well, how were they able to abuse people? Well, they set themselves up as idols, unquestioned and unquestionable within their industries. So what Charlie Rose said at CBS was true. What an accuser said clearly wasn't true. And so they got away with it until enough people obviously rose up. So idolatry is not only about macro events, but it also is in our intimate encounters. And so your father, unfortunately, thought that he had super authority somehow by virtue of his position in the family, whatever it was, that meant that he could do whatever he did as a whim compared to your mother. And that is idolatry. And this is the second thing I'm going to say that I wish people keep, again, this point, if they don't remember anything but the idolatry in this point, is at the core of all real true religion is the golden rule. Hillel said, this is in the Christian scriptures, it's in the Hebrew scriptures. The core is how Hillel, the ancient sage, summarized the entire Bible. He said, don't treat anybody the way you wouldn't want to be treated. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it. So Stalin wouldn't want to have sent himself to the gulag. He wouldn't have wanted to. He wouldn't have wanted to have been starved. I'm sure that the Xi doesn't want to be sent to a Uyghur concentration camp in the Xinjiang province, and I'm sure that Harvey Weinstein wouldn't have wanted to be treated the way that he treated other people. These people use their super authority for their whim. And so the guts of not having idolatry is the golden rule, because essentially once you say I can treat someone in a way I don't want to be treated, you are deifying yourself.
Yes.
And that's how horrors happen.
Yes. Now, I want to just comment about that further. For everybody who's just heard Scott, this is a teaching moment on the show. I mean, come back and listen to it. There's a lot in that last statement about idolatry. Scott, I just want to pull that out of my paper here. There's I wrote down here from your work, the heart of the book. And then I wrote down idolatry. And for some reason, I wrote banks underneath it. So I want to tell you about what I was thinking there. Is the heart of the book, source of the atheist confusion, is that most modern people no longer understand what it is meant to be by the concept of idolatry. And you've just heard everybody, Scott, define that. And I want to tell you, Scott, that when I did my TED Talk in February, this is just by chance this happened, where we were told to go to the auditorium where we were going to perform. And it was called the Bell Center for Performing Arts, 1,000 people in the audience. And they said, go and check out the stage so you don't have stage fright. And I went, okay. So they were supposed to line up the tour, Scott, but they couldn't get in. So a friend of mine said, hey, there's a church group there every Sunday. It's free. Go sit in the audience and experience what it's like to be there. I walked in, Scott, and there's something that happened in me. First of all, they were talking about Psalms, the Psalm of David. And I met this young guy, Pastor Mark, who was 10 years teaching religion. And since that moment, I started digging in and learning and getting into the Bible in a big way. He did a sermon just recently about idolatry, and I didn't understand it until he put it in the terms that you did. And what I never realized, and my wife and I were talking about this on the weekend, my wife's Italian, she's very family oriented, in that I've built my life and most people around institutions that will crumble. Families, parents will die, jobs will go away, money will disappear. And we've built ourselves around these institutions. But the one thing I didn't understand was the institution of the final journey, the kingdom of God, however you want to talk about that. That is that one thing that it's like being in business as a CEO, and you create this vision and your company's moving toward it. You can get knocked off the path, you can fail, but as long as you're anchored to that end vision, nobody's ever going to knock you off that path. And I guess that's where my life changed just recently about this whole concept. And one more thing I want to add is my mom, when she was growing up with her, she would go to the doctor and they would give her all these pills to take for this and that. And just what you said, I'm going to make a connection. Doctors were like clergy. You just did what you were told. You didn't question it. And so these authorities around us, even growing up as kids, those are some of the examples. My dad was a commanding officer in the military, so part of that is the thread in, the authority he was given. And so I love what you said there. Teach us a bit more about how the Bible. I think I read somewhere about the tenets of the Bible, how to deal with idolatry, or however you want to explain it, how the Bible plays into that.
Sure. Well, first of all, the thing I've learned in my journeys, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, and a good chunk of the book is devoted to this, is the less people know about the Bible, the less they like it. And I find that when the Bible is opened up when people understand what the Bible was trying to do, that it becomes much more accessible. So before the Bible, the whole world was idolatrous. I mean, every little group had a god king. There was no sense that we were all brothers and sisters. If you were part of the Hittites, you were part of the Hittites, and you could kill all the Egyptians and that would be okay, because they weren't part of your god king. They weren't going to make the water, the rains, irrigate your crop.
Yeah.
They were going to, and if you were an Egyptian, killing all the Hittites was okay, unless they would become a vassal of some sort. So
Yes.
that was the world of the Bible, and we would have gone in a very bad direction had we continued on that line. And to some degree we did, because we didn't really lose our idolatry.
Yes.
The Bible gives us stories. If you read the Bible, none of these folks who are encountered are perfect people. They all go through journeys. Abraham goes through a journey. Moses goes through a journey, but you get the essence of what they are. Moses' story is incredible. Moses was a prince. He also had a lot of miracles happen to get him where he was, to become a prince in the Egyptian palace. And that's certainly better than being a rock star, to be in
Yes.
that era, to be a prince. And yet when he saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating an Israelite slave, he knew he had to act. And when he acted and killed the Egyptian taskmaster, he ultimately found out he had to flee because the word was out. He knew, because he looked from side to side, he saw no one. He knew that he was risking his life in the palace. He could have had a cushy life. Nobody could have actually criticized Moses for not taking action, because what ended up happening, he had to flee. And for 40 years, he was in Midian. He thought he would be in Midian forever. So he went from being a rock star and having a harem to having no shoes and taking care of flocks of sheep. The audacity of that was incredible, but he did what he had to do. The Egyptian took Pharaoh's daughter. There's lots of examples. Pharaoh's daughter saw Moses floating down. Now, by the way, in those days, and even recently, we read about it in some of the Gulf kingdoms, monarchs have no problem murdering their kids if they don't abide by the rules. And
Yes.
she knew, Pharaoh's daughter, that by reaching out and taking this baby that somehow showed up, she was risking herself. And yet she had the moral courage to do that. And again, she could have just looked away for a moment or two and gone on with her cushy life. And again, nobody could have blamed her, because that's what most people do most of the time. The question is, and what the Bible depicts again and again, are people who meet the test and they do it. And I'll give you one more example. There are many, many examples. The Book of
Sure.
Esther. Are you familiar with the Book of Esther? It's a short book. It should be read closely and carefully, because people misread that book more than they read it right. But
Yeah.
I just want to. So Esther is in the palace, and she gets word from Mordecai that the king and Haman have decreed that all the Jews should be killed, and that's what's going to happen. She ended up in the palace because of a reality style beauty pageant, but she ended up being queen. That was a big surprise. And she sends back word to Mordecai, don't worry, I can't do anything. I can't approach the king. And if I approach the king without being asked, I could be killed. I'll send some clothes for you. You can come in the palace. I can save you. And what does Mordecai send backward? Don't think that you will escape the same fate as the rest of the Jews. But be aware that You may have ended up in exactly this place precisely to do what needs to be done. And she gets it. And that changes the whole story. Each of us are going through, we all are going through a life story where we face tests. You faced some massive tests. Unbelievable, and tests that would challenge any human being. And that's, to a certain degree, what the Bible is saying, is then now you are placed to do something to make this planet a better place. Will you make that choice, that difficult choice, that courageous choice to do something positive that will improve this planet? Or will you avert your eyes, just worry about having as cushy life as possible, and go forward? And that's what the whole Bible is all about. And when you can situate yourself, when you find yourself with those choices, the Bible gives you guidance how to do that. And if you do that, boy, then you've really got good faith, and your faith will improve this planet. If you don't do that, life will go on, just like Esther was saying, but Mordecai said, but it won't be as good. Relief and redemption will come someplace else, but you won't get to be the hero.
Absolutely. You said there's so much in there, and I've gotten more excited about this whole concept of idolatry, and you're sending me on a journey in different directions again. So I'm just going to throw some things out here that, you said, do something with that. Some will say your message, use your pain to help others. What I learned is, and through the work I teach, is that we, most people don't understand or can never find what that true purpose is. And that we're on this unthinking treadmill of life, Scott. Get up in the morning, go to work, get a good job, make a lot of money. Quality of life equals a quantity of stuff. And sometimes when these things happen in our lives, these painful things, and we question why they happen, we try to work it out, we can't find the answers. And then we turn to God and we say, why have you forsaken me? Help me. And what I've learned through my faith is that I've had to stop trying to work out the path in my life and trust and believe that God's in my life, and there is a path that I'm on. And one of the ways to feel full up and beyond work and the material things in life is to give back, create a legacy, contribution, spirituality, however you want to call it. Since I started following my faith and doing things with my work and my platform, Scott, exactly what you said, you nailed it, is I felt this thing inside that I've never felt before. There were people who said to me when I first started working, I was a CEO for most of my life, and then I created my own company to teach others, wrote my book and and there were friends of mine even close to me who were questioning, what are you doing? And they say that when you have a purpose or a calling or you see a vision, most of the people even closest to you will question you because they can't see it. This calling that I've had inside really comes from that point of, I believe God was in my life since the beginning, that he was there working in my home, working in my life, even as a business leader. I want to tell you something really crazy to share with you publicly that you might laugh at me, but that's what this is all about, right? Is it be telling your truth. I mapped out on a flip chart, and I can send you the page, the journey a young man takes or a young woman to becoming a CEO, right? So get out of school, education, you work your way up the ladder. And when you get to the top, it's a different world. They say it's lonely at the top, right? And when I got to my first CEO job at age 31, I didn't know what it was. And I just knew I had to be the best. And that, by the way, was driven by idolatry, by significance, replacing the love of my father, which I never had. And so I get to the top, and I started looking for people to help me. How do I be a CEO? How do I create a strategy? How do I work with a board of directors? And then I discovered these things that only come to CEOs because the companies won't pay for it for frontline and middle managers. Things like communities, peer groups, mentors, coaches, guides. And so when I was a CEO and there was nobody there with me to, when I fell down, when I needed to say I'm struggling, I was feeling vulnerable talking to my board or my bosses, there wasn't somebody there I could have a conversation with in confidence until I discovered the world of coaches and mentors. And then I looked at the other side, which is the kingdom of God and Jesus Christ. And now, today, I've been taught how to have a conversation with God. I speak, I pray, and that's the connection for me to being a business leader and now teaching the message in the Bible. And that if you can find a mentor, you can find somebody who already represents what the end looks like, and they will stay with you. They won't judge you. They won't criticize you. They will give you stories and teach you. God wrote the Bible, from what I understand. It's not about you and I. God wrote it, but you nailed it. The stories in the Bible are stories where people can learn, and there's wisdom in it. And when I actually turn those stories into stories that they can be applied into business, in every case where we've fallen down or struggled as CEOs, many learnings from the Bible can apply. So my aha moment was, part of my mission, my dad gave it to me. He said, "Carry on, son." He said, "I love your book," which was about him and my journey in business. He said, my dad died, by the way, and 24 years sober. And I didn't know this because I was estranged from him, but he was out talking to prisons and teaching in meditation groups and teaching the Bible. And my dad said, "Son, I pass the torch to you." And that's part of the new mission now, is going to the world where I live, much like you, the business community, and mentoring and teaching and coaching, but bringing in a thread of lessons learned from my faith. I think if we can crush that, we can make the world better. Now, I want to know what you think about what I just said. It might sound off the wall, but I really believe that everything you're doing and what you've said, we need to get that message out, because in my TED Talk, I called out the top leaders of the world. They're the ones creating the stigma around mental health, not the people in the field. I believe that the stigma around the Bible and faith, that the people who have the megaphone to change, are the people like you and the people at the top. What do you think of what I've just said?
Well, a few things. First of all, I think what I'm hearing from you is something that is consistent with the way that I think about prayer, which is, prayer is not about thinking of God as a cosmic vending machine. I want more of this, more of that. I'd be happy if only I had X, if only I had Y, and then the world would be good. And thinking that somehow we can offer God a better plan for the world. Moses, it says, was the most humble person on earth, and his prayers were answered. And I think the reason is because prayer that really works is a no deception zone. So a lot of us, me included for sure, it is easier when you're a chairman, a CEO, a senior manager, to self-deceive, because so many people, can even help enable that. But what prayer is really all about, having a conversation with a being for whom that knows everything. There is no place to hide. So you can tell yourself lies. I can tell myself lies. But if I really have the faith that I'm talking to an omnipotent being, then like other people, when we look at our real truth, our real capabilities and what we're doing and not doing, we have the tendency to cringe. The light is so harsh and the excuses are so puny that it makes you reevaluate, makes me reevaluate. What am I doing? How can I make a meaningful difference? And yes, we're on a journey that we're sent on. But the point is, most people don't know what that journey is. I mean, there are two important dates in this world. One, when you're born, because that gives you the ticket. But the second date which is the only one we can do anything about, is figuring out why you were born. What is our mission? What is my mission on this earth? Why am I here? What can I do? And it can be a very small thing. We may be just here to do move something in a small way for good.
Yes.
It may be come down to an interaction, or it may be something big. If you are a president of a country or a world leader or a CEO of an important company or a big company, it may be big, it may be small, but prayer helps us discover what we're here to do. And I believe in this firmly, that when you calibrate and you figure out what God would want to make this planet, to perfect this planet, and what you can do, even though it may be hard, and it may be that you have to move yourself from the path you're on, you may have to adjust your journey, that you get a tailwind. It's not like, the streets part and the waters part, but you do get a tailwind. Things become a little easier if you put in the effort. But if you don't put in the effort, if you don't scrutinize yourself, then it is a bit like thinking that God is a cosmic vending machine. And that's totally the wrong way to think about prayer. Prayer, if it really works, is really about 99% about examining yourself and 1% about asking for some help.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I wrote that down. I think you coined the phrase "cosmic vending machine," and we're gonna have to keep that one.
I wrote it in my book. That's one of the phrases in my book.
But isn't that true, Scott? I mean, you nailed it again. I mean, people pray to God when they need something, right? And we teach executives for blind spots to self-reflect, look internally, right? It's everything you need is within you now. I want to just mention Napoleon Hill. You might be familiar with his work in Think and Grow Rich. It's a very well-read business book, and it's not about money. It's about the keyword think is in the title. And I studied that for 6 months. And one thing I learned is the power of mastermind. Hill says nobody succeeds without the power of a mastermind, which is two or more people in harmony seeking to some purpose. But I learned I learned that Lincoln, your famous President Lincoln, who I admire for abolishing slavery. And I also found out he struggled with depression. He was a workaholic. So many threads in there. But we can mastermind by dialing down to our unconscious mind and have conversations with people. And one of my famous quotes, people ask me, "Oh, what's the number one thing that you think parents have as a flaw or a character trait that kids would want?" And when kids are asked, they say to be patient. And my number one idol for patience is Gandhi, who drove the British Empire out of India without violence. So I said to my wife, I want to be like Gandhi. I want to learn patience. So I've started watching his movies, and then I can sit in my chair and meditate and mastermind and actually have a conversation with somebody like him. It seems bizarre, but that's the power we have. And I have the ability, and we all do, but there's no difference than masterminding or having a conversation with God. I mean, everything you're saying so resonates. Part of me says, why didn't I know that, 40 years ago? I have one more question, and then we're going to move to honoring you as we wrap up here. This has been an amazing conversation, everybody, with a very brilliant man. And Scott, I know we'll have you back. And that is, I'm a Canadian, and I've traveled the world, and, the audience is international. You're in America, I have many friends there. What's your best advice to North Americans, how to live their best life?
Well, we're in a time that almost seems biblical to me. And I think we're all making really, really fateful decisions. Geopolitically, there's huge change taking place. Within our countries, there's political unrest. There is social unrest. And on top of that, we have an economy that hopefully is going to become the 80% economy. Right now, it's not even that. So
yeah.
I think that what everyone needs to do is to figure out how can they be part of a way of making this, their country, their community, their home a little better. And it's different for everyone. There is no one answer, but it is about that self-reflection. And by the way, you asked me sort of about atheists versus believers. Look, I think that prayer is the ultimate meditation because it makes you reflect, but you also recognize that there's an omnipotent being who can see through any self-deception. Yeah. I'd say believer or not believer, think about what you can do in connection with the golden rule. Don't treat anybody the way you wouldn't want to be treated, because we're all going to face a lot of questions. We're all going to face a lot of decisions, and just put yourself in the other person's spot. And if you do that, and if you habituate yourself to doing that, wherever you live will become a better place.
That's awesome. COVID-19's here, and as we finish up here, we're doing video. But is there a message behind this, the divine message to the world? This chapter?
I don't know. That I don't know, but I do know this: that we're constantly faced with tests. That's what the Bible's all about. This is another one, and there may be a bigger one. But on the other hand, we faced some big tests: World War II, the Holocaust. We faced a lot of big tests, and this is just another. And we can't get over it.
We needed to hear that, Scott, especially in this time. What it means to me is in the time of COVID, I found that it's important to spend with family. And all this stuff I've been telling you about my own faith and learning, watching TV, reading the Bible, it's because I have more time. And the last thing I want to tell you is, I don't know if you noticed, but they've had some pictures up of the world from satellites when COVID was under its initial stages and the pollution cleared. The planet became healthier. And so I believe that there are some key messages there that don't know, like you said, if it's connected to above, but pretty amazing. I want to honor you with some leadership words. I do this, Scott, on all my shows, and then we're going to induct you with an award here. So I don't know if you were prepared for this, but as you see my head moving here, I'm writing words down as I'm interviewing you. So there's some leadership words. The first one is Maven. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, there's mavens. These are people, they say, if you want to know something about this topic, if you want an expert, he's the guy. Well, Scott, everybody, is the man on the topic of religion and atheism. You need to get this book and read it. I'm Scott. I'm going to write a review for you online. 2 is Trailblazer. Dude, you're blazing a trail in places that could be uncomfortable. You'll take some bullets, but you know what? Your work is purposeful and we need it. 3 is Faith. When I talk to you, you could be my mentor, and you're a man that believes in things you can't see. I love it. And then 4th is humility. I think you know that there's a way about you and something about you that almost like, I want to stay a while and I want to learn from you. So thank you for letting me honor you those. And behind me is a screenshot of the award. And so this is called a challenge coin. Don't know if you know what they are. Challenge coins were founded in the World War II era, Scott, and they were given to soldiers to carry. And they signify community. And if you showed up without one, maybe you bought a drink for your buddy. Today, they're used around the world by the police forces, Alcoholics Anonymous, you name it, to build community. And when I started this show, which is really part of my total work, I said, I want to have people come on who will park the ego at the door, tell their authentic stories of failure and triumphs, but teach us something, and then use that to teach the world. And so I'm inducting you today into the Quiet Warrior Tribe. You'll receive that coin. It has the show art on the front, if you can kind of see a little bit as I move this way. Who's that guy? And on the back is actually the Hero's Journey narrative. They're handcrafted and painted in the United States. Sorry, Canada. And I'll be somehow arranging that, and hopefully I can hand it to you one day in person. So on that note, tell us where we can get a hold of. Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna be doing things. So tell me how people can get a hold of you and your body of work.
So I'm easy to find. As one of your recent guests said, you can just practically Google me. But easier is scottshay.com, and I'm reachable. There's a form there. It has articles that I write. Podcasts, book event, book tours, my Google Book Talk, my TED Talk, all sorts of things that I've done. But You can find my book. I used to say at quality bookstores everywhere, and that's true, but many of them have been closed. But you can find it on Amazon, the Audible version. It just came out in paperback last week, so I'm
great.
This is the hardcover version, but it just came out in paperback, and so I encourage people to read the book because I poured myself into that book. We didn't talk about it, but I spent 5 years writing this book, and it's really made a difference for a lot of people, and that makes me very, I feel privileged that so many people have been impacted by the book. I really feel privileged.
Well, thank you, and you've impacted me deeply. And by the way, it's received many reviews and praise. And what is remarkable, Scott, is in the write-up I read, you've got faith leaders from every denomination commenting on this book, which is amazing to me. So everybody, find that website. The book is called In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism by Scott A. Shay. And I'm going to get the audio because I'm a fan of audiobooks. And look Scott up, even just to connect and find out more about what he does. Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've learned a lot, and I'm going to invite you to come back again as this story evolves.
Thank you. It'll be a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed this time.
All right. Well, everybody, live life with that true passion like you see Scott do. Live life with a purpose and find that life that you deserve and desire. And thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca